Hello friends. In this episode, we are going to talk about the sense of screen directionality, which means that where the character should look and how to create the space for the audience. We know that films are shot on a 2D plane. That is, whatever we are watching in front of us are on a plane. That is, we do not have a relationship between the character and the space behind, or even the character and the camera, the space that is in between these two elements. From the theater age, we have moved into the film age, where the cameras can be positioned anywhere we want. From the long shot, now we can get closer to the characters, get their emotions, get their action details and everything. Now the question is, can we place the camera anywhere we want? The answer would be no, because the relationship between the audience and the character is defined by the space that the editor creates. By space, we mean the physical things that are arranged within the mise-en-scene. What are the rules that guide the creation of space for the editor? Let me give you an example of two people talking and you are watching the conversation as an observer. In this case, you will look at character 1 and in certain cases you will look at character 2. When you are filming this, you will definitely need two different angles from character A and from character B. Now, when I'm looking to my right, I more or less compose a frame and I see the character is looking left of frame. When I look to my left, I see the character who is sitting opposite to character A is looking right of frame. This defines my position as an observer. As I am watching these two characters converse with each other, I am not supposed to go to any other location within that given space. This is also a rule that applies when you are editing a film and precisely when you are shooting a film. This is called the imaginary line rule or the 180-degree rule. The 180-degree rule states that if you are shooting two characters from a particular position and if there is a line that is drawn between the two characters, then you are not supposed to cross the line and go to the other side. So if we have two characters A and B and we have a line joining these two characters, all that can be shot should be from this side. I can't go onto the other side of the imaginary line. If we at all cross the imaginary line, it is called crossing the line. Let us see an example from the film Godfather. This is not the original sequence.
I ask you for justice.
That is not justice. Your daughter is still alive.
Let him suffer then, as she suffers. How much shall I pay you?
As now you have seen the sequence, you will see that both the characters are looking right of frame. If you see this as an audience I mean that if you see this as a normal audience without knowledge of filmmaking, you will feel uncomfortable. That is, you will feel the shots are placed and they are not seamlessly falling in place. This is happening because the shots are defying the rule of space. In other words, it is not following the rule of 180 degree. Now let us see the example which is corrected, which is actually there in the film.
Justice, your daughter is still alive.
Let him suffer then, as she suffers. How much shall I pay you?
Now if you see the conversation happening between these two characters, you will see one character is looking left of frame, the other character is looking right of frame. Here, if you watch this sequence as a normal audience, you will feel the space. You will feel that this person is actually looking to the other person and they are conversing with each other. While maintaining the 180-degree axis rule, it is often seen that in certain films, the reference of the character who is back to camera is used as a reference. The part of his or her body is used as reference. This is called an OTS, or over the shoulder shot. An OTS again makes it more comfortable for the audience to relate to the space. So if the OTS of character A is placed, the shoulder is placed right of frame, the counter shot will have the OTS left of frame. But when the director chooses not to use the reference, then the 180-degree rule becomes indispensable, because you have no other way to establish the space and the directionality. Many film directors like Ozu have opted to use the on the axis position of the camera on the imaginary line, which means the camera assumes exactly the position of the character, which is the end of the imaginary line. Giving the camera an angle gives the direction of the character towards the other part of the frame. But if the shot is on the axis, then the character looks straight onto the camera, as I am looking towards you. This does not have a technical problem, but the actor always looks into the camera and the sense of directionality is minimized here. So the character can be facing any which way and the director can choose any angle he wants, because the sense of space or sense of the imaginary line is actually gone in this case. Let us see an example from an Ozu film. Here you will see the characters actually sit on the axis. When we cut closer to these shots, then he chooses to use OTS, and then when he cuts close to the character, he chooses the on the axis position. Although if you look very carefully, the look is not straight into the camera but a little pointing towards left and right respectively, but it's almost on the axis.
Do
This kind of treatment is mostly seen in Japanese films, especially coming from Ozu, because the Japanese culture is more or less like this. People sit and people talk to each other frontally. Otherwise, on the imaginary line or on the imaginary axis, the camera can move anywhere he wants, but the camera should not move until and unless there is a dramatic necessity. That is, when you want to cut close for dramatic emphasis, that we have already explained in our previous episodes. The 180-degree axis rule that we explained should not be broken as far as classical narrative or classical filmmaking is concerned. But in many cases, the rule is broken. There are methods to break the rule. That is, there are methods in which the breaking of the rule is not seen, or there are methods in which the breaking of the rule can be salvaged. We will see examples from different films where we see the breaking of the rule happening. With certain filmmakers like Ozu, as I have already mentioned, the breaking of the 180-degree rule has happened a number of times. But the method in which the shots are taken and the mise-en-scene and everything put together does not make it disorienting. So one can understand the rule break is intentional and not accidental. Let us now see examples where the rule can be broken and it does not affect the audience's perception of space. The first one is, let the audience know you are crossing the line. In the first sequence of the film Godfather, we will see when the two characters stand up, they actually cross the 180-degree line. In this example, we'll see that the camera observes the entire movement and these two characters shift their position from left to right to right to left, and we have arrived at a different axis position. Since the audience has gone through this entire experience of changing positions, it does not affect the feeling of the space. So this is a valid cinematic treatment. The rule is also broken in cases the action becomes dominant. Let us again see the first sequence of Godfather, where the character sitting opposite to Godfather stands up and walks up to Godfather and whispers something in his ears. The shot that follows is actually a violation of the 180-degree rule, but this happens on a dominant action. The action of that person getting close to Godfather's ears and whispering something. In this case, the shift of axis does not really disorient. Technically speaking, this is wrong, but this does not affect the audience. It becomes more entertaining and more informative as a cut. So this is valid. The 180-degree rule may be broken in certain situations where it was not possible for the director to stick to the axis that he was shooting on. In certain other cases, it may also happen that it was accidental. In both cases, the editor has to solve the issue. In this case, in certain examples, we see that an insert has been used in between to prevent the audience from noticing the jump in axis. The audience is always not attentive enough to understand that the axis has actually changed. Let us now examine the rules that an editor should follow when cutting within a given space. Let us give an example of a sequence which is happening inside a room. Obviously, the first rule that has to be followed is the 180-degree rule, where the camera can move from point A to point B. Usually, a cut is made on magnification change. That is, we move from a wider shot to a closer shot and then again back to a wider shot or a mid shot, depending on the narrative structure. But if the director wants to move from point A to point B without changing the magnification, then the rule that applies here is called the 30-degree rule. The 30-degree rule says that the shift of position from point A to point B should be at least 30 degrees with respect to the character that is being shot, which actually implies that the image that is formed by maintaining this rule is different enough from the previous shot. Otherwise, this will look like a jerk. Let us give an example from the film High Noon. Here we see that the shots that are cut one after the other is not maintaining the 30-degree rule. To mend this problem, the editor has used a shot of the clock in between as an insert. If we remove the shot of the clock, then we'll see the cut is not 30 degrees apart. But since there is an insert of the clock in between, the jerk is not visible to the audience. Continuity editing evokes expectation, which means that when an action is happening, like a person is moving from point A to point B, doing an action, etc., as an audience, we are always expecting what is going to happen. That is, we are speculating the action much before it is actually seen on screen. This is called evoking expectation. I am expecting something to happen on screen. Let me give you an example of a film by Jean Renoir called The Rules of the Game. In this film, we see an entire action sequence on a long shot. After a point of time, there are two people or two sets of people fighting with each other on a long shot. As a normal moviegoer, I would expect, and I would also expect the editor to cut close to the action happening. I should cut close to the punches, I should cut close to the person falling down, etc., as it happens in other films. But it does not happen in case of Jean Renoir's film, The Rules of the Game. This is called evoking expectation. Jean Renoir actually wanted to say something else with this shot. There are two layers of incidents happening in the same frame, and that is what made the scene interesting. Another example can be given from the film Godfather, the first party sequence, where the cameraman was caught clicking pictures. The cameraman was thrown out of the party, and the person who dragged him outside threw the camera and broke it. A normal moviegoer will definitely expect a cut here. He will expect the cut of the camera falling and eventually breaking into pieces. But the director here preferred to keep out of it. In this case, the director wanted to minimize the sensation caused by the breaking of the camera. He wanted to prove that the cameraman was as unimportant as the camera. So he preferred a long shot than to cut to a closer shot. But all these sequences are working because the audience is expecting a cut. Since he is not getting the cut that he wants, he is trying to infer different narrative styles, different character politics, and so on and so forth. The cause-effect relationship between two shots are also important and things that the editor should think about. By cause-effect relationship, I mean that shot A and shot B is related with a cause and an effect. If shot A is the cause, shot B should be the effect, or vice versa. Let me give you an example from a film called Run Lola Run. Here, the girl who runs into her father's office enters her father's office, and as the conversation proceeds, she screams. Her scream makes a wall clock shatter into pieces. I would say the shot of the girl is the cause, where she's shouting, and the effect is the breaking of the glass of that particular wall clock. That is the effect. The effect is that the clock shattered into pieces. In the same sequence, if I reverse the order, that is, the girl enters her father's office, the conversation goes on, and the clock shot is placed first. The clock shatters for some reason, and then the girl shouts. In this particular example, the shot of the clock becomes the cause, and the shouting girl becomes the effect. So, placement of shots in different orders changes the cause-effect relationship between two shots. Matching an action also creates the sense of space. When shot A's action continues to shot B, it also enhances the space or extends the space from space A to space B. In this example from the film High Noon, we see the lady at the reception. She inquires about certain lady staying upstairs, and she walks up the stairs.
3.
Thank you.
The next shot is taken from upstairs and the lady is entering frame and she walks up the stairs and enters the door. Considering High Noon was shot entirely on a set, we can assume that there was no upstairs. But the set was constructed and the shots were taken in a way so that it looks like she actually moved up and to the first floor and entered the door. This is becoming believable because the action matches from shot A to shot B. Matching action also creates off-screen space. In a particular example from the film Return, we see that a group of boys are playing on a diving board and one of them dive from that board and enter the water. The director has taken two shots. One, the shot of the boy jumping, and the second shot is taken from the water level where he actually jumps and enters the water. In this particular edit, the space between the diving board and the water is established by the cut. Let me give you two examples. In the first example, we will try and create the space between the water and the board, which is much more. Because when we cut from shot A to shot B, that is, in the shot A, the boy jumps, and in shot B, the boy enters water. If the shot or the action of the boy entering water is delayed for a few seconds, then the distance between the board and the water increases. So the space which is not actually seen in the images are established with off-screen space creation with the help of this cut.
Смотри, подмышки не отбей.
In the other example, which is actually the real example, where the boy dives from the diving board and enters the water immediately, which means that the distance between the board and the water is not much. With these examples, we can actually infer that the distance between the board and the water can be manipulated with your editing points. While talking about screen directionality, the main thing that comes in an editor's mind is the eyeline match. Eyeline match is said to have happened when the character is looking at the other character's eyes or certain elements. Let us see an example from the film High Noon again, where the character looks up and we have the shot of a clock. In this particular cut, if we see, the character who looks up looks above the camera position. That is, he is looking at something which is higher than him. This is followed by a shot of the clock which is taken from a low angle. That means that the thing or the clock in this case is being watched by somebody who is standing below the level of the clock. This is basically called eyeline match. We also have another example from the film High Noon where the lady who is near the reception area looks up and we have an eyeline match with the character who is standing on the staircase. In both cases, the look of these characters match as required. Eyeline match as a method of storytelling was profusely used in the film called Rear Window by Alfred Hitchcock. In this film, an entire sequence of shots were placed on the basis of eyeline match. If you see the sequence of the telephone conversation that is happening between our protagonist and the person on the other side of the telephone, and the person is looking at the building just opposite to his, he is looking at different areas of the frame, and as he looks up, we have one family. As he looks down, we have another family. And as he looks straight, we have another family. So all these things establish that these families are placed on the other side of the house, and they are either from the first floor, second floor, rooftop, etc. All these things are happening naturally because the eyeline match is defining the space for the audience.
Did I get the wrong day?
No. No, wrong week. Next Wednesday, I emerge from this plaster cocoon.
Oh, that's too bad, Jim. Well, I guess I can't be lucky every day. Forget I called.
Yeah, I sure feel sorry for you, Gunnison. Must be rough on you, thinking of me wearing this cast for another whole week.
Well, that 1 week is going to cost me my best photographer. And you a big assignment.
Well, where?
Now, there's no point in even talking about it.
No, come on, where?
Cashmere. Got a code tip from the bureau chief this morning. The place is about to go up in smoke.
What did I tell you? Didn't I tell you that's the next place to watch?
You did.
Okay, when do I leave? Half hour, hour?
With that cast on? You don't.
Oh, stop sounding stuffy. I can take pictures from a Jeep or a water buffalo if necessary.
You're too valuable to the magazine for us to play around with. I'll send Morgan or Lambert.
Morgan or Lambert, that's fine. I get myself half killed for you, and you reward me by stealing my assignments.
I didn't ask you to stand in the middle of that automobile racetrack.
You asked for something dramatically different. You got it.
So did you. Goodbye, Jeff.
Now, wait a minute, Gunnison. Now, you've got to get me out of here. 6 weeks sitting in a 2-room apartment with nothing to do but look out the window at the neighbors.
Bye, Jeff.
Now, Gunnison, if you don't pull me out of this swamp of boredom, I'm going to do something drastic.
Like what?
Like what? I'm going to get married, and then I'll never be able to go anywhere.
It's about time you got married, before you turn into a lonesome and bitter old man.
From these examples, we can say that storytelling is all about editing. Editing actually narrates the story from one image to the other. Let me give you another example from the film Return. In this case, we have 2 shots. One is the boys are jumping from the board into the water. And we have another shot of the camera exploring the deep. These 2 shots can be placed in 2 different ways. One is where we place the shot of the underwater sequence before the boys dive. This will narrate a story in a way that there is something underwater who is waiting for the boys to jump into the water, and something else is going to happen.
Смотри, подмышки не отбей.
The other option is, let us place the diving shots first and then have the underwater sequence. In this case, the story changes. The story would be now that the boy jumped into the water and he is now exploring the deep, because now the shot of the underwater sequence becomes the POV of the boy. So in this episode, we saw how editing can change the narrative of a film. In the coming episodes, we'll talk about what are the different kinds of shots and what these shots actually mean when placed at a particular position within the narrative structure.